I'm going to talk tonight about my experiences in prison, but first off, I want to know, if any of you know anyone who's been to prison? Anyone at all? A few. Great. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to share some of my experiences with you tonight. I was actually a prison social worker for 5 years in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so tonight I'm going to share with you some of my experiences to try and move us beyond the tough on crime rhetoric and think about the power of relationships for young people. So I'm going to tell you about a story about a young woman that I met while I was working in the prison, and she was actually 14 years of age. And she was 19 when I met her. So when you think about if you've got someone who's 14 in your life, what they're like. So that's how old she was when she first came to prison. Anyway, one day I was running a group for her and some of her contemporaries, and suddenly she let out this enormous string of swear words, really vile, which I cannot repeat right now. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after the group, she came up to me and she did this. Miss, I'm so sorry for swearing in your group. Oh, 5 years ago when I first came in here, I would have beaten her up before I'd even looked at her. Couldn't even stop myself, but now, thanks to my jail mum, I just swear when I feel angry or threatened. I think we can all agree that moving from beating someone up when you're feeling angry and threatened to just swearing is a huge step forward. And it was all to, in her view, to the help of her jail mum. Now, you wonder, why do I say jail mum? It's because in New Zealand, at the time I was working there, young women prisoners are aged mixed with adult women prisoners while they serve a prison sentence. And I was actually asked by the Department of Corrections whether or not this should continue, the age mixing, or should they have their own unit just like the men have. So I started a doctoral study to find this out. And my first point of call was to talk to the young women themselves. The first person I spoke to, I said, what do you think of the idea of a youth wing for women? She goes, youth wing for women? Boulevard Hollywood. It will be so much drama. We need the adults. We need them for guidance. We need them to help us manage ourselves and our anger and just how to be. Please, don't separate us. The next young person I spoke to said, gosh, I get into trouble so much, but when I feel I'm going to get into trouble, I go and sit next to one of my aunties in jail because I know she'll keep me in line. And I think what this shows, there were many other young women that said very similar things, but this shows that young people who have broken the law, they don't do it just to get away with it. They really, really want to have help from others to be their best self. And in those two instances, you could see how much they went towards older people to help them with their managing of their anger and what a difference it made. The thing is, the Department of Corrections does actually run programs designed to help people reduce reoffending. And one of the groups that was running at the time that I was a prison social worker was called Straight Thinking. Sounds great, doesn't it? Trouble is, people come along to Straight Thinking while they're in prison, they do the program, they go out in the community, they come straight back in again. No wonder it's called Straight Thinking, yeah? The trouble with straight thinking is it's not really complex enough for the young people to be able to use what they learn and apply it to the outside world. So clearly another approach is needed. Sometime later, I had a job as an academic working at Deakin University. And I was having a lovely coffee morning with a dear colleague who's an occupational therapist and a play therapist. And I was telling her some of the things I'd noticed with the young women prisoners and some of the difficulties they faced. In addition to having a difficulty managing their anger, they had difficulties with perspective taking and consequential thinking. And while I was telling her this, a big smile spread across her face. And she said to me, Sophie, those are the very abilities that children develop through play. But the great news is that play is a lifelong activity. So maybe some of those young people didn't get the opportunity to play as young people, There's always time to catch up. We realised this idea had real potential, that we could actually build on the principles of pretend play to create a program for young people that might be useful for early intervention, that could address these issues of consequential thinking, self-regulation and perspective taking. So on the 9th of July 2015, we started our first rollout of the program in a school. And we asked the wellbeing team to send us young people who'd been identified as having social difficulties. We had many come to our groups. One particular young man who came to us, we were told his social difficulties were so severe that he wouldn't stay with us longer than 5 minutes. He'd be walking out the door, out the gate, and wouldn't engage. Well, after being in our program for just 2 sessions, when the bell rang for recess, he didn't actually want to stop doing his activities. He wanted to carry on. And after we finished the 8 sessions of the group, he actually got other group members together, and then he continued with the play-based activities, leading them. So not only did he participate, he ended up leading. And this was a young man who was identified as severe social difficulties. But what he'd found in that group were relationships where he felt he could be his best self, and he had a sense of belonging. Belonging is in short supply for young people when they come out of prison. It's very difficult for them, especially in today's environment with the tough on crime rhetoric, for people to give them a fair go, for them to find a job, find people to get round with that aren't in the criminal scene, find somewhere to live. I was really transformed in my thinking from watching the young people in prison and the adults who supported them. They taught me so much about the power of relationships to really support people no matter what their background, to be their best self. Look how much they'd overcome. So I put it to you. What could you contribute in this space? Could you be a mentor? Could you perhaps offer job opportunities or volunteer opportunities for a young person that's coming out of prison? Could you maybe advocate for fairer policies? Together, we could create a community where young people, no matter what their background, can rise, rebuild, and reach their potential.